Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Atkinson, Senior Editor at Supply Chain Brain. I'm excited to be moderating this webinar today, sponsored by Locus Robotics, the topic for which is creating an efficient and dynamic warehouse with collaborative robots. I think we all know we're in the middle of a labor shortage that's not going away anytime soon, and adding humans to warehouse operations is simply not an option for most businesses. But by implementing collaborative robots, warehouses now have the means to consistently achieve optimal productivity in a scalable manner that addresses current and future dynamic fulfillment environments. Today, we're going to learn how collaborative robotic solutions can be flexible, productive, and resilient. After we get an introduction to this topic from Locus Robotics, we're going to have a panel session with our two speakers. Then we'll move to a Q&A session with questions from the audience. That's you. Please submit questions at any time using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so you can go ahead and ask anything you like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the Locus Robotics team will reach out to you offline. Right, let's get to our speakers. Sophie Pagalde is Director of Product Marketing at Locus Robotics, where she has worked since 2020 as the champion for autonomous mobile robots, also known as AMRs. She is responsible for crafting the messaging, scalable growth models, and go-to-market strategies for Locus. Then we have Dan Coote. He is Global Product Manager at Locus Robotics. Before joining Locus, he spent close to 6 years at DHL in operations management, development, and product management. Right, without further ado, I'm going to hand off to Sophie from Locus.
Thank you so much, Helen. For those of you who are not familiar with Locus, we wanted to start with a short video that really goes over how we work with collaborative robots and some of the benefits that organizations are seeing these days.
You're looking to improve warehouse productivity, but not all robots are the same. Some systems are inflexible and require large investments. Others limit performance by forcing pickers to follow slow robotic carts. Only one solution has the intelligence and flexibility to help achieve the highest levels of productivity. This is Locus Robotics, the solution that thinks outside the cart. Locus frees your workers from cumbersome carts, dramatically reducing wasted walking time. Locus uses multiple nimble robots that deliver greater capacity and productivity for your warehouse. Let's take a look at how Locus's multi-bot solution works. Locus's intelligent clustering algorithm continuously reviews orders from your WMS to maximize productivity and chooses orders to optimize work density. At induction, Locus directs the associate to use the optimal pick container. It then dynamically calculates the smartest path through the warehouse and proceeds to the first pick where your associate meets the bot. The bot displays the pick information on an easy-to-read display in the associate's preferred language. Your associate picks the item, scans it with the integrated scanner, and places it in the appropriate bin. Here is the real game changer. With Locus, your associates don't follow the robot. After the pick, the bot directs the associate to the next closest robot for more work, while the robot moves to its next task, often with a different associate. Your associates engage with multiple robots to complete more tasks faster. With Locus, you get true task interleaving, with associates able to easily switch between picking and put away. Locus continuously evaluates your order pool, associate proximity, and even congestion, resulting in shorter cycle times and greater productivity to better meet your SLAs. There is no need to log in, slow down, or carry other devices because the robots are shared resources that bring the work to your associates. You can use any combination of container types, including your existing containers or shipping cartons. The bots charge automatically and can work around the clock. And Locus is flexible automation, allowing you to easily scale seasonally. Just add bots. Locus's innovative industry-leading reports, dashboards, and analytics give your team the powerful, actionable information that they need in real time, helping you drive continuous improvement. Proven and reliable, Locus robots are working to pick a wide variety of products in warehouses around the world, where clients see 2 to 3 times greater productivity and achieve measurable ROI in just a few months. Best of all, you can be up and running in as little as 4 weeks. And you're never on your own. Our customer success team is always available to help you meet your changing business needs. Choose the solution that takes your fulfillment to the next level. Choose Locus, the solution that thinks outside the cart.
So I hope that gave you an overview of how Locus works. What we wanted to share with you too, and I apologize, this is not letting me, there we go. So I'm having some issues with slides, I apologize. Okay, there we go. So hopefully that gave you an overview of how Locus works in the warehouse. And there's also still a reality out there, which is we're still seeing that most of the warehouses are still very manual. This is kind of the perfect scenario for us to really come in and support the operation with collaborative robotics, because one of the things that we see is that when you see kind of this environment today, very manual and really having the workers walk around the warehouse, pushing carts, it is incredibly hard for workers to maintain this job. And I'm sure all of you are experiencing these challenges with labor, where retaining labor, even attracting labor is a challenge, given the strain on the body, the amount of walking that the workers have to do. And it's just not as engaging as we're seeing with robotics. So there's also a lot, kind of an impact on, I'm sure you know, on your operation as well, in terms of the productivity. We're seeing that this manual process really doesn't allow customers to achieve the SLAs and the customer expectations that are in the market today. And it's also really hard to scale when you look at seasonal peaks or even demands in volumes as well. We especially saw this obviously coming out of the pandemic when e-commerce accelerated, and we're continuing to see this. That acceleration that has happened is continuing, and demand is growing, and being able to add capacity to your warehouse so that you can really ship all those orders on time, it becomes a challenge when the labor is not available. And also when the response time is not there. So this is really what we're helping our customers with initially, but we're seeing as kind of a byproduct of implementing robotics as well, is that this manual process then does not provide a lot of data to customers either, in terms of what's happening in real time in the warehouse and how the work is getting done. So we want to really share with you today what that looks like for our customers, and what an implementation of robotics at scale really can help you achieve. This is an example of one of our customer sites. You can see hundreds of robots really running around. We've implemented about a couple hundred sites so far. We have about 80 customers globally. And we're seeing more and more of these deployments where, we're kind of past that pilot stage really in terms of implementing robotics. And we're seeing that customers see the benefit and they want to continue to expand and scale. And one of the things that you'll see here is that this is a very flexible type of automation, right? So the robots can move around, are very nimble. They can move around the warehouse. They can perform a lot of different tasks and collaborate with the humans. And they're collecting data as they're going through the warehouse as well. And Dan and I will also share with you more about kind of what that reporting looks like, what kind of data you can expect. But we're constantly in real time, really kind of assessing what's happening in the environment as well, to make sure that we're really completing every single task the most efficient way. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan, who's going to talk to you a little bit about kind of how automation with robotics works, and then some of the benefits that customers are seeing.
Thanks very much, Sophie. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone on the call. So this is an overview of our solution. I think really what makes our solution unique is that common execution platform that sits across. So ultimately our software. So our software has integrated with a wide variety of WMSs in the market. And from there, effectively, we take your orders and we're able to do a variety of use cases with them. So from each and batch picking all the way through to put away and replenishment, as well as then case picking and point-to-point transport. And then we also have the ability to ultimately integrate and collaborate with solutions like pack size as well, some of our partners in the market, so that we're offering really the end-to-end offering. So all the way from put away through to your orders going out the door. That's what we can offer as part of our Locus solution. And then I think that the data that Sophie touched on earlier related to what you can draw from a manual solution, that's where we can offer some real value and real data insights into ultimately how your warehouse is operating, but also to how we're using our solution. Jumping on to the next slide. Sorry, I'm having issues jumping on to the next slide. Perfect, thank you. So we've seen typically a 2-time unit picked improvement when we go into customer sites, so improving productivity by 2-fold. We have seen as much up to 3-fold, but ultimately this depends on what your starting base is. If you've got a mature site with a good baseline, then obviously that expectation of 3x is not likely. But if you've got something that is less mature, then we can see up to 3x. But also some of the benefits, we see a 3x cycle time within there. And you can start to really see the comparison between operating with our solution versus without our solution in place. And then ultimately, what does this mean from an employee and manager point of view? So from an associate or colleague point of view, we're seeing much higher levels of engagement than what you would see in a manual operation. Ultimately, people love working with our robots. I think virtually every operation that we have, most operations name their bots. And there's that real sense of kind of interest and camaraderie around the bots and associates. So people don't generally kind of see what you would have with barriers associated with robotics and automation, where it's kind of there to replace jobs. People really love our solution and really engage with it. The next point on there really is all about kind of improved retention. So we know during peak periods that it's really difficult to get hold of the labor and keep them in place. By offering that more engaging working environment for associates, we've seen improved retention across the board. And as you know, the cost of then churning that labor extensively is very high. And then a safer working environment. So one of our implementations in the UK, Boots actually saw a 77% reduction in health and safety incidents with the introduction of our robots versus having a manual solution in place. So we have a proven track record of safety with our solutions, and they are very collaborative, working in some very close proximity with people in that environment. And then from a management point of view, so ultimately the next level up is kind of your shift manager and ops managers. They have real-time visibility. So rather than having to go through your WMS, running historical reports, and then having to look retrospectively at the previous day, what you're able to do with our solution is see in real time how people are operating that day. Ultimately, if you're not going to meet the throughput, you can make adjustments according to what the data is telling you, which our customers really like and can see the benefit of. All of that real-time visibility is enabled on either an Android view on your phone, or equally some of the dashboards like you see on screen, where we provide some televisions within your facility, and you can look up at these various views that offer those insights. And then the last point on here really is about kind of focus on optimization. So not only does this give your managers that visibility in which to drive performance, but we don't just implement the solution and then we're gone. We are a partnership approach. So over the lifetime of your contract, we're ultimately going to be with you through that. So our customer success team will be working closely with you as well as other key stakeholders in Locus to make sure that you're driving optimization. And ultimately, the concept of operation that we build a business case on with you is realized, and not only realized, but fulfilled and pushed beyond what was originally agreed upon at day one. And thank you very much. I'll hand over to Helen.
Thank you, Dan. That was really interesting. But Dan and Sophie, I have to say, I think those robots look really cute. I want to work with them. So we're going to move on to our panel discussion now with these two experts who are going to together dig deeper into the transformative use of collaborative AMRs in the warehouse. I want to start by asking you, Sophie. What are the key drivers for operations? What motivates people to pursue robotics automation?
Yeah, so we just shared a little bit about labor, right? So labor, as you mentioned at the beginning too, Helen, is really the biggest challenge. I mean, we used to see customers really wanting to definitely improve productivity, with the labor that they had in place. But today what we're seeing too, there's a big challenge in terms of adding capacity. So again, as those volumes increase and you need to get more throughput out of your warehouse, we're seeing that it's very challenging to do when the labor market is what it is, and it's very hard to bring people on. So, being able to add that capacity and then almost kind of find that sort of way that you can predict almost how many more robots you need to add that capacity even during peak, right? Because once you have the robots working in the warehouse, then you know that if you add this many more, this is how much more you can produce. So it really kind of accelerates, the throughput as well. So customers can really meet their SLAs. They can also, ship all the orders that they need to ship. And then the other aspect of it really is kind of the safety of the workers as well. So, not only is it hard to attract labor, but it's hard to retain labor. And being able to provide a safe environment is critical for customers today. And then also, honestly, we're finding that people love working with robots. You just said you would love to work with those robots. And we find that it's, it makes it engaging for them. It makes the job just more interesting because you can say, working with robotics, especially for, some of the younger generations coming into, into the labor market as well. So we just see it as a benefit overall for customers to add robotics to really solve some of these concerns.
Right, so it's cool technology, and I gather that you guys often your customers will have bot naming contests. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So we really work closely with customers on how we onboard, kind of their workforce as well, and how do we introduce them to the robots. And we want them to feel comfortable that, the robots are not here to take their jobs, but they're here to collaborate with them and really work with them. And so we've done some fun things like working on naming contests. I know Dan has an anecdote from DHL that he wanted to share too.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Dan,
absolutely.
tell us about that.
So the CEO supply chain of DHL is called Oscar the Bot, so appropriately he had a robot named after him, Oscar the Bot. And he actually had a recent picture that went viral on LinkedIn of him meeting his doppelganger here in the UK.
Oh, fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, we also see people dress the bots up. So for the holidays, they'll put hats on them, and
wow.
They really truly see them as a co-worker. DHL also just launched a campaign called the Ultimate Sidekick, and it's really all about our robots and how they work with their workers. So we really see, people embracing the robots again as a co-worker, as that helpful hand, right? Someone that's going to be their sidekick and really help them get through the workday, really.
Right. Wonderful. I want to dig a little bit further into that in a minute, but I want to just get back to you, Dan, and saying, what are the sort of key drivers? What are the breaking points when you go to a customer and they said, okay, we're gonna automate. what are the sort of prompts that make somebody think it's time to do that? Are there typical ones, or is it different for each organization?
I think it varies, but ultimately the key one that is consistent is it's about meat and throughput levels that either have become too difficult to sustain based on some of the challenges that we spoke about. Labor is the normal one, but equally, kind of given the eruption in kind of e-com over the last 5 years, it's that level of growth, and particularly around peak periods. Peaks have got so large that these facilities for a 6 to 8 week period simply can't cope with the volume and the number of people that they're required to get into their facilities during that, as well as the associated costs to do that. So more and more, those are the primary drivers, but equally one of the things that is emerging is because e-com is so demanding in which to operate in that environment, we're seeing customers come into us where almost regardless of cost, they're wanting a robotics solution. Wow. Just so that they can hit their peak numbers, because peaks are so valuable to these customers that they can't afford for the unpredictability that comes with having a manual operation. And our bots help to provide that stability and that predictability that you need during those really high throughput periods. But also, I think if the last 2 years has taught us anything, it's the unpredictability that these peaks can really come out of nowhere. So a great example of that is Boots in the UK and I, where when the pandemic started, they are out of season, as it were, out of peak. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic started and they went to basically peak volume straight away. Luckily, they had already our peak bots still on site, and they were about to send them back, and they basically kept them and managed to sustain that. And that was a key help to Boots in order to satisfy that volume at the start of the pandemic and equally sustain it all the way through.
Right, and my understanding is that one of the drivers of the or one of the characteristics of increased e-commerce is that you have smaller orders to fill, so they become very labor intensive, and efficiency becomes even more important. And I think it looks like the robots are particularly good for that sort of, increased picking rate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then I think I would also add that just the ability to adapt, right? So again, like one thing we've learned in the last couple of years has been, it's unpredictable. So building that resiliency in the warehouse is critical these days. Being able to adapt to whatever comes your way, maybe the type of order that you need to fulfill, maybe the volume that you need to fulfill. But when you think about kind of traditional automation versus more flexible automation like robotics, the great thing about flexible automation and robotics is that you can add more robots to the space and do more versus traditional kind of environment. You can't very quickly rip out steel and put more infrastructure in, right? That takes time. And so if you have to respond and all of a sudden you have to increase that throughput, it becomes a challenge.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I wanted to move on a little bit about specifically where can collaborative robots add value in the warehouse? Dan, I know that Locus just did a report with Forrester about the economic impacts on customers who implemented Locus Robotics. So obviously there's some financial gains, but maybe we could talk about that and the more operational value that collaborative robots add. Yeah,
absolutely. So other than looking cute, as you mentioned, they do provide some value as well. So there's the obvious one, which is the business case, that ultimately, because we increased productivity by kind of 2-3x, depending on the facility, you're going to see a business case improvement, and equally a quick ROI, because we charge a one-time implementation fee, and then we have a robotics as a service module. So there's not that CapEx strain on your business in which to get going on robotics. Instead, we provide a rental service here. So that's really kind of the first driver. But as I mentioned in your last question you asked, that equally, we're getting to the point where people are almost business case aside, wanting to have robotics simply to have that stability and predictability that our solutions can provide over a peak period or throughout the year. But then also, I think as our kind of one of our earlier slides showed, it's not just picking, it's that end-to-end operational solution value. It's almost picking off the roof of a building and looking really inside. What's that end-to-end workflow that you see in pretty much every single warehouse? And collaborative robots and our solution can provide value end-to-end. Whether that is doing the actual task itself in collaboration with the associates and managers in that facility, or equally pairing with some of the partners and some of the other technology that's in there. So pack size is a great example of that. So us handing off to pack size and providing an efficient pick and pack solution.
Right. Sophie, what other value adds do you see?
Yeah, so Helen, you mentioned that we're going to be sharing that DEI report at the end as well for everyone who wants to read it. But we did go through a pretty in-depth analysis with Forrester to understand what were some of those cost savings, but then also the impact on the operation. And Dan shared that some of those during his presentation. I mean, we see that 2-3x productivity improvement. We see those cycle times, getting faster and faster. And then something that we're diving into more now too is the safety aspect, and there's cost associated with that, right? So there's workers' comp, claims and things like that customers are able to avoid. So not only does it keep the labor, safe, but it also, there is a cost savings in terms of being able to retain the labor, right? Because it's incredibly expensive to also go replace that labor, but then also keep them safe so that you're not having to deal with accidents, and other types of safety concerns that may cause the operation to be disrupted in some way.
But I think it's a great point in terms of the retention of labor as well. And we didn't touch on the data piece, but the data piece is really important, because actually not only are managers able to engage with their employees more and manage on a real-time basis as well as a daily basis, which gets then associates interested in how are they actually performing. Like the amount of manual facilities I've been into where I've walked up to an associate and asked, what's your target UPH or LPH? And they have no idea, versus going into one of our operations and asking an associate that. It's right there on screen. They can see where they are against that target. And in many cases, a lot of sites run competitions around being the top picker. And people get a real interest associated with our bots as a result of that gamification and that real-time data that we provide.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
And that's critical too, Dan, if I can add too, because the way we look at data is how do we really enable different types of people that need to have access to that data, right? So there's definitely kind of an executive view where you want to really look at kind of what's happening across the operation or multiple operations, right? Because you want to keep the pulse on, are we meeting our SLAs? Are we meeting, our targets in terms of throughput and volume? But, at the manager level, like Dan was saying, you really want to see kind of what's happening in the operation, work with your team there to make sure that you're really staying on track and then addressing any potential bottlenecks. But we also believe that it's important to enable the associate as well. So we have two ways that we do that. There's on the iPad that is on the bot, they're able to see where they stand, for the day. So like how much work they've completed, how they're doing against themselves. So it really is gamification, but for them to really understand, am I doing better? Can I do better? Right. But then also we provide data in terms of where the work is in the warehouse and what's happening and what the robots are, so that the associate also can make decisions around where do they need to go next, where are they needed. So it really kind of enables everyone to address things in real time, so that you're not ending, the day and now realizing that, you missed the mark somewhere or something didn't get done or we're now behind. So it really, really helps everyone.
Right, so that you're talking about the data can be sliced and diced so that every constituent can find it useful from an individual associate role, facility manager, and everything in between. That's fantastic. So Dan, I wanted to ask you, I know, obviously Locus Robotics is the best, but there are so many robotic solutions out there. How should companies evaluate the vendors? How do they compare services?
Yeah, I mean, I got a bit of experience doing that, having come from DHL. I think ultimately for me, and I think many of the operators that that you're dealing with would be wanting to see that solution. So I would start with that. And I mean, we have a number of sites globally that can be visited, whether that be virtually or equally in person, and going to see and really seeing is believing. And I would start with that, would be my view. But equally, ultimately, the relationship that you have with these vendors as well, because ultimately, this is not about a transactional relationship. This is a partnership approach that you're bringing a business in for the long haul. So the majority of our contracts are on a 3-year basis. There needs to be that gel and that commonality that we're going to provide value to your business. And then there's obviously the numbers, where you're looking at the concept of operation. How does that solution pair against my facility, the expectations of what I'm going to need from a KPI and a throughput perspective? If it's engaging with a 3PL that then has another customer, how my KPI is going to match against that end customer's expectation, as well as then ultimately, I think looking at it, if you're a customer with multiple warehouses, I think my best advice is looking at that blend of automation is appropriate parts of your network. It's not the answer to your entire network. And making sure that an AMR solution is going to provide the flexibility that you need, either at a single site or within a network.
Right. So the important thing is to remember you can introduce it gradually, or you can choose an area to automate and go in. And it sounds like that's great. So you're absolutely open to having site visits from potential customers to see how these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we would encourage it, or if a trade show is more convenient, we have collaborative interactive booths there as well. But yeah, absolutely encourage it. And equally, we've got a huge range of testimonials on our website that kind of bring that to life for people as well. But yeah, as you said as well, this is something that you can start with, and you can increase more so. But also you can start with an area, let's say picking, and then build off there. You can start doing put away with our solution as well. You can then look at how does that integrate with pack size. It's a modular solution that can be built up over time, but equally it can be incorporated elsewhere in your network. So that's something that commonly happens with our customer base. So we'll go into a single site, make sure that it gels and works with their operating model and their network, and then we'll expand throughout that customer's network into multiple sites.
Fantastic. Excellent. So Sophie, I'm curious to know, I know that for some people, the perceptions of robotics and or the sort of dystopian science fiction movies and whatever can be somewhat of a barrier. How have your customers overcome those perceptions of robotics and successfully introduce them into their operations? It sounds like the answer is hire young people, but I'm sure there are other answers too.
Yeah, no, I would say that the robots work well with all all ages or all types of people. I mean, I think, if nothing else too, really taking that strain from like the physical aspect of the work can extend the life, of the kind of the career of workers too, because then you're not, really putting that strain on the body and really on the physical requirements. And so it actually can be even more inclusive in terms of kind of those requirements to do that job.
That's a great point. Yeah.
But I would say, definitely change management is important. So, we do believe collaborative robotics, are the way to go, because we do believe the human still plays a very important role in the operation. And what we're trying to do with the robots is really take that that physical, the hard aspects of the job, like the physical strain on the body, the walking, the carrying heavy items, the pushing carts, all of that makes the job not as appealing and not as safe, honestly, for the worker. And then to allow the worker to focus on what humans are really good at, which is completing the task in an accurate way, right? So the humanist is really in charge of making sure that they're picking the correct item, that they're putting the item in the right location, things that humans are really good at because they have multiple ways to check that that's being done accurately.
Right.
So we really want to enable and empower the associate, elevate their role so they're really seen as a valuable resource and again, something that humans can only do. But I think it's important that the way that you introduce the robots into your organization, that you do it in a way that everyone understands that and that they don't feel like there's going to be cuts or, I feel like anytime that you're not clear about exactly how this is going to be introduced and what that means, obviously there's going to be fears. Everyone goes through that when there's a change in the workplace. And so we really work closely with our customers on that, all the way from management to making sure that they have the right tools and the right, way to communicate this to the associates. And that hand holding is important, and then for them to feel like this is a tool for them. And again, it's not here to replace them.
Fantastic. Dan, what do you have to say about, because you're more in the coal face of dealing with implementations. Have you had customers find novel ways to get over people's fear of change?
Yeah, I think linking to kind of what Sophie's been saying, really, we're quite dependent on our customers to do a good job of doing this, because it's all about from our sales cycle through to then, if a deal is signed, we then hand over to the customer success organization who will hold a kickoff. And really one of the things that we try and do is create a stakeholder map of from a facility. This is your typical facility, so your planning manager, your ops manager, your health and safety manager, etc. And we'll look and expect those people to be involved at that point. And if they're not, we'll be asking questions as to why not. Because the last thing we want to do is turn up when we get into UAT and testing, and these bots all turn up on site, and the site has no idea as to why we're there,
Right.
what we're doing, and
Sure.
And that's happened, that becomes a real barrier, because obviously we've then got to work and convince those people as to why we're there, how we're going to benefit the facility. Whereas if that's all done up front, people really become kind of champions of the solution.
Right.
Like we've got a huge customer base where we have champions across the board that are huge advocates of our solution. As a result of the way that we engage with people, help them to understand our solution, and show them how it works and how it can benefit them.
Wow, thank you. That's really interesting. So let's talk about implementation at scale. So say you've got a typical customer, they've just introduced autonomous robots for picking, say, and now they want to scale up, or they're facing one of these peak seasons that we were talking about earlier. What's the next step in a customer's journey with this type of automation after the initial introduction? Dan, can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be as you initially kind of scale up. Really, from the initial concept of operation, we have a number of large sites. So what does large look like? We have a number of customers within the EU and UK, as well as in North America, that are operating well over 100 bots within their facility, across over hundreds of thousands of square foot of warehouse space. So Boots in the UK and I is a really good example of that. So during peak, they're up to 220 bots. They actually operate in a very dense area, so it's about 60,000 square foot area. And it's a great example of us meeting throughput in a very dynamic environment. But you don't have to have a solution, or you don't have to have a warehouse of that scale in which to be considered using Locus. Like we operate down as low as kind of 10 bots is our minimum threshold, and then everywhere in between. And then of course you can kind of scale up and down during peak as well. So we provide peak bots for the period that you determine is your associated peak. And you just lease those bots for that period of time. And then at that period of time, they're then shipped back to us. So you don't have that financial burden that would normally come with automation, as an example, where you ultimately design to a peak threshold. And then for the majority of the year, that peak capability is never utilized. You don't have the associated overhead with a solution like ours based on a commercial approach.
Right, and this ability to scale up and scale down is really interesting to me, because one of the things it does, I think you mentioned this earlier, is sort of shift the expense from a CapEx, which is what's typically associated with technological improvements, into an operating expense that fluctuates according to volumes and peak seasons. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I think we talked a little bit about data earlier, but I wanted to just dig into it a little bit more with Sophie. Can we talk about how robotics augment analytics and data to help inform operations managers?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say the biggest difference with what you would see from a WMS, for example, is that the WMS needs those inputs to know what's happening and to be able to kind of show, what is happening, like a clear picture of what's happening. But the WMS is not in the warehouse really, going through the aisles and understanding how the work is really getting done. We have that capability with the robots where they're in that physical environment and capturing data as to, what were the tasks that were completed, how long they took, who completed the task. Because as the humans interact with the robots, as the robots run, travel around the warehouse, they are capturing those data points. And so the data is incredibly real time, right? And it doesn't take as much of that input. I think that's one of the challenges with software data, right? Is that it's up in the cloud, and unless someone tells it what happened in the real world, it doesn't know. So I think that's kind of like that layer that we can provide from a data perspective. But then, the way that we display the data is really meant to enable, like I was saying, the different kind of stakeholders, right, who need to have access to this data. So we work to really kind of create that mission control sort of view for the managers in the warehouse. So, usually they have a desk or, where they can have some of those dashboards up, and they're incredibly visual. You saw some on the video, but they're incredible visual, so they can really see clusters and, kind of a heat map of what's happening. And so it's very user friendly in terms of quickly being able to see that data and act on it, right? You don't have to read through reports or really, look at tiny font somewhere. It really is very, very visual and user friendly. And we do the same thing with associates. So we install displays, big displays, throughout the aisles. And this is really to help kind of the associate, again, kind of be in touch with what's happening in the warehouse. And we feel this is really critical in terms of giving them also the power to decide where they go next, how they support the operation as well. Right,
sure. That's fantastic. So you can really identify problems in real time, among other things, bottlenecks, etc. That's fantastic. I think I want to move on now. Thank you so much to both of you. I think we'll move on to some Q&A session, because we've actually got some really interesting questions from the audience. I have one here about somebody's interested in the Locus Max. That's your heavy duty AMR. Can you talk a little bit about that? Dan, I think you could probably.
Yeah, sure. So Max is part of, last year we acquired a company called Waypoint Robotics, who are integrating into our business over the course of this year. And Max is one of the bots that came with that Waypoint acquisition. Effectively, Max is a heavy payload bot that we're going to be using for case picking, for case replenishment, for full pallet picking as well. We're in the process of integrating that into our overall offering. It'll be available, generally available from next year, but we'll be running a number of pilots as we integrate that into our business over the course of this year that can provide some further insight into that solution. But really interesting solution, and ultimately it sits under our Locus One, which is our software platform, as well as then kind of Vector and the Origin bots that we have as well.
And does it take any longer to set up than a regular bot?
No.
No, super. So just to remind the audience, please submit any questions you have using the tab at the bottom of your screen. And we won't be using people's names or titles or company names. So you should feel free to ask whatever you like. And if we don't get to your question during this session, please be assured the Locus Robotics people will reach out to you offline. Another interesting question here, and I think this goes back to the Max. Are there robotics options for larger containers and skid-sized locations? This particular person saying most of our products are pulled by skid quantities, and that sometimes some skids are built differently from other skids. So is Locus Max going to be the best solution for that, or are there other ways to deal with skids and pallets?
We have, like Dan said, 3 different robots, and they can each handle different payload. They have different payload capacity in terms of weight, but also in terms of cube. So we usually look at it from the perspective of that cube. What do you need, and also the volume that you need to move. So we actually have the robots work together, and we will assign the right robot to whatever is, the right fit for that task that needs to be completed based on the volume, what needs to be moved, and what the task is.
Super, thank you, Sophie. Another question, what kind of IT support or other kinds of roles do you need in order to help support this robotic solution? Are there any specialized people within the customer's organization that are required?
I think not really. Based on the roles that you would normally have within a site, so your ops role, your planning role, your health and safety role, your IT role, those are the key roles that we need to work with in order to get our solution in place. Obviously, they're going to need to learn how to use our solution and operate in a slightly different way to what they would be normally. But yeah, our kind of teams help with that whole transition between moving from whatever type of solution you're using at the moment, whether manual or whatever it is, to using Locus.
Yeah, maybe it just
Sophie.
That so we have an all-inclusive RaaS model, and that really includes also unlimited support and unlimited maintenance, everything that the customer needs. Unlike other solutions, we do not require someone to be on site all the time to maintain or support the solution. Our solution is, honestly, I mean, it's very mature. We've been running these robots for years, so we've kind of figured out all the the quirks, and it's working really well. So there may be the occasional issue that we need to support the customer with, and we have an incredible support team that is available 24/7. Run the sun, so it's not an issue. Customers can call us and we can get someone to help them.
Right, that's really interesting. Yeah, and I have another question here about maintenance, funnily enough. Are you typically doing maintenance on site, or do they have to be, or do the bots have to be taken away, or just, I guess it depends on what they need?
Yes, we have a field service team who will normally come on site at least once a year, in which to perform some routine maintenance. If there's an issue with the bot, then obviously our field service team would come and visit the site in which to resolve that. And then equally from a kind of a software point of view, as part of that RaaS model, you have a customer support team 24/7 globally that will support resolving any of that from either from a maintenance or a problem shooting point of view.
Yeah, and also we can get new bots shipped out within days. I mean, we've done it for customers. So if there's a need to replace a bot, we can get that out to them very, very quickly. So lead times are not an issue or anything like that. We always have inventory and can do that.
Right, great. Let's get on to training. I've got a couple of questions about that. How much training does an associate typically need in order to work with the bots?
Not much. It takes about 15 minutes. Anyone can do it. I
Wow.
think we even proved it at Modex, right? We had people coming into the booth and within minutes they were able to pick. The
Wow.
user interface is so user-friendly. It's very visual. It really kind of walks you through the steps. So you can at any point come up to a bot and know what you need to do and kind of go through those steps. So that's one of the key benefits, right? And again, when you think about labor and kind of getting them up and running quickly, that's something that really helps our customers.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the benefits from a training and speed to competency perspective are huge on our solution. So hey, if you pick up any kind of green screen handheld device on any of your normal WMSs, people hate getting trained on them. They're normally quite complicated, and then it takes a while to get that person up to speed, and they normally might have a buddy in which to help them get up to speed on that as well. Whereas our solution from that point of view is super straightforward, and we normally see benefits that are baked into the business case from a training and speed to competency point of view.
That's fantastic. We had another sort of technical question here about what would be the critical steps in preparing the warehouse management system to link up with collaborative robots?
So, I mean, obviously, we're going to need integration with your WMS. We've got a lot of experience with integrating with the majority of WMSs out there in the market. Mm-hmm. And if we haven't integrated with it, then we obviously have the ability to evaluate that. But ultimately, we're going to need an endpoint in order to talk to the WMS, and then depending on the workflow, that will build up from there. But we aren't seeing, and particularly WMSs now, they're seeing the market for robotics are significantly reducing the barriers that you might have seen. So when we first got going in 2015, there were some barriers to integrating with the WMS. Now it's a lot more seamless in terms of how we do that, as well as as well as from a cost point of view, much lower as well.
Great, that's fantastic. And let me ask you, how many sites has Locus implemented altogether worldwide?
So we're now
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead, Sophie.
No, I was just gonna say we're almost at 200. I think that slide needs to be updated, but yeah, we're at a couple hundred sites at this point.
That's fantastic. And any particular lessons learned from doing that many implementations?
Yeah, I mean, number, but I think that the key one is, and you asked us a little bit earlier around kind of how do we make sure people don't fear the solution. It's all about customer engagement. So because we provide that end-to-end service to the customers, you're always going to have a face from Locus Robotics that's making sure that you're engaged, that you're understanding the solution, and ultimately going live with something that you're happy with, and then running through the lifetime of that contract with people that you're happy with. So as much as possible, we will make sure that there will be someone within Locus Robotics that is effectively on the other side of your questions or your queries and helping you understand the solution.
Yeah, and I would also say we have an incredible customer success team. So one thing that we've learned is, you know, like any solution, you just don't, kind of install it and let it go, right? I mean, there's obviously that need for constantly looking at how can we do better, and we really kind of embrace that, philosophy, I guess, of continuous improvement. And we work with our customers very, very closely to make sure that once we've met that next target that they're trying to hit, that we're really looking at what else can we improve. And this, we work very closely with them on understanding their workflows. Are there any bottlenecks that maybe we can, change if we shift some of the flow, or, maybe there's something that's getting in the way. Maybe there's a conveyor that's going through part of the warehouse that is preventing the robots from, going through that straight path. So we're all constantly looking at that and working with customers to make sure that that they're constantly improving and really reaching, higher and higher throughput goals and productivity goals.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. Well, we're getting a little tight on time, so I'm going to ask both of you one final question. And it's what's the best way to get started with robotics? Sophie, how do you get?
Yeah, so I would say, I think at this point we've removed a lot of the barriers to getting started, which I think is great news for our customers. We're seeing customers really come on live and within 6 to 8 weeks. So if you have concerns about timing, I think we've kind of addressed that. And I would say also the RAS model really helps because, again, you don't have to go through that huge budget approval process, right? It really is a kind of it's an OPEX, kind of expense. And it's really easy to get approved because it makes sense in terms of you can actually map out exactly what the ROI is going to look like. We map out the ROI to be around like 6 to 8 months. So it's really easy in terms of getting that budget approval, understanding that the timing, is going to work out. And then also I think just really minimizing the impact to your operation from a disruption perspective. We're not requiring a lot of infrastructure changes or changes to your workflows. You can really kind of bring in the robots and they can work in the environment that you already have set up. So I would say, those things make it easy. So if you've had any fears about any of those things, I would say talk to us because we can walk you through exactly what it's going to look like and give you that confidence that you can get it done quickly and cost effectively.
That's fantastic. All right, Dan, how do you follow on from that?
Yeah, no. So I would say making sure first and foremost you're very clear on the problem that's trying to be solved, and then ultimately doing some research in the market based on what that problem is. So I think, and we'll be very open about this, we are not a one-size-fits-all solution. But we do, there's a significant portion of the problems in warehousing that we can help solve. And then I think best for me is really either through what's available on internet content, so i.e. testimonials, videos, and all of the rhetoric we have on our website, or actually reaching out to those businesses, trying to arrange either a site visit or a virtual tour of the facility. And then starting that discussion. So there is absolutely no harm going through the process of getting a coup generated with us and understanding is that going to meet the business goals that you need. That would be my main advice, and try it out. Right. Whether that's at a single site, you're not wedded to it for your network.
Right, fantastic. So basically, take the plunge. It sounds like. Thank you. Yep. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. This has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much to Sophie and Dan from Locus Robotics, and a special thanks to all of you for participating. I think we've learned a lot today about how collaborative robotics can really improve things in the warehouse. We had a lot of questions today, and we'll be answering the ones we didn't get to with you offline. You're also going to get an email later, very shortly, with a link to view the webinar on demand, and you can share it with people, as well as a link to that report we mentioned that Locus generated with Forrester about the economic impact on customers of implementing Locus Robotics. There'll also be contact information for Locus, of course. Thank you so much to everyone for your participation. Stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.